time.
Welcome to the 12th broadcast of Book Lovers Corner for 2019. In fact, the last broadcast for 2019. We are being broadcast on the Wairarapa Community Access radio station Arrow FM 92.7 every fourth Tuesday of the month at 3:30 to 4:30 throughout the year. Our next broadcast will be in January. This is one of 12 community access radio stations in New Zealand, and we are sponsored by Elmo's Books, our wonderful independent bookshop in Carterton. You can listen to our program live online by connecting in with Arrow FM, or listen later via the podcast, which you can download onto your device. This particular broadcast is actually being broadcast earlier because none of us will be available on the 24th of December to broadcast it live. So it is being recorded. The Book Lovers Corner can also be watched on Wairarapa TV Freeview Channel 41, as well as on YouTube. We'd appreciate any feedback you have by contacting the station's Facebook page. I'm Valda Kirkwood, and the other members of the team are Gareth Rapson and Sue Lawrence. Welcome, Gareth. Welcome, Sue. Now, we're going to have, as usual, a discussion of books we've read since our last broadcast and any news of books. And then I will actually, on the advice of a neighbour of mine who said, I want to know the books are at the beginning that you're going to review, so I know whether to listen in or not. So before we start the main program, I will be indicating what books that we are going to review this session. So I think that the thing that's most important to me has been the death, much waited for since he announced his imminent death in, was it 2010?
10 years ago. Yeah.
10 years ago, and is Clive James. And I had the great pleasure in going to the 2004 Writers and Readers. I flew up from the South Island to go to the Writers and Readers, part of the International Arts Festival in Wellington. And one of the threads of that was on essays. So Elliot Weinberger was one. There were others, but Clive James was quite memorable. And this book, I actually, as I say, his reliable essays had just been published. And so he talked about that, but he talks in such an engaging way that, you become quite entranced. He's got the most acerbic sense of humour, but is so funny and so clever and witty, and also has such political comment as well as literary comment as well. Have either of you got anything to add to that?
Well, he has to be my favourite Australian, or was, now deceased, but and he's a classic example of someone from our neck of the woods, getting into England and making it, and becoming a kind of a star, an intellectual star, and that's why I think he really was able to make an impact. That he kind of made terrifically good sense about lots of topics, where he had a great eye and a great way of superb way, prose and control of the language. On it seemed like any topic he could wax on.
Yep, and because he's Australian or Antipodean, be able to make comment on in the class system and challenge some things in the UK that perhaps was not quite as easy for those born there and raised there. But the astonishing thing is that he was diagnosed with leukemia, but kept writing and kept producing and kept saying, my imminent death, but then producing another book. So pretty amazing.
And lots of poetry too.
Yes. A lot of poetry.
Yeah.
Oh, sorely missed.
Very sorely missed, yep. Now, in terms of we're coming to the end of a year, and you posed a question to us all while we're in our pre-broadcast meeting, Gareth. What was that question, please?
Well, I was just sort of saying to us, look, if we had to pick a book of the year, what would we come up with? And, because I'd thought about it a little bit before that, so I was prepared, but I know it caught you guys a little bit on the hop. But and I was looking very quickly at some of the books we had discussed through the year, and we had Haruki Murakami's Killing Commendatori. To me, that was the best book of the year for a narrative, so I really enjoyed that. William Boyd's Love is Blind, nice, competent bit of historical fiction.
Yeah.
Tara Westover's Educated was a terrific look at growing up in an odd part of America. Sebastian Faulk's Paris Echo, and Robert Harris's Cicero trilogy, The Last Meeting, and probably my favourite New Zealand book was probably Fiona Goodman's This Mortal Boy. I still think that had something to tell us. And the best art book on how to live a great art life was The Colours of a Life by Douglas McDermott. But there were other books too that I really liked that we didn't even discuss on the program. Outgrowing God by Richard Hawkins, I thought was a terrific read, and his wish was that it was pitched at teenagers, and he was hoping that his book would end up in every school library in Britain. Could well be in our libraries too. Most fun was probably Identity Crisis by Ben Alton. Probably got the most laughs out of that. But all in all, terrific year of books. But in the end, I don't think there's ever one book. There's just books in the various categories that readers read across that will jump out at them. But always interesting to hear what people are going to say.
And I think my pick of the year was Underland by Robert Macfarlane, which I just loved because it opened up a way of looking at the planet that was totally new to me, and yet it shouldn't have been. And learning lots of history, that some of which I knew, but others of which was that wasn't. And so I think because books that do something to your head and your way of looking at the world is what makes a difference for me. And the other one I liked, and I talked about that one in October, the other one I really liked was Bill Bryson's The Body, which I talked about in November. And so, but both of those books are pretty solid books. And
literally.
What was that, Gareth?
Oh, literally,
Both, literally, yeah. and you had to read them thoughtfully. Right. But they also opened up ways of looking at our lives and the land that perhaps are different.
Was Overland, just remind me, was it a new book, or has that been out for a while?
No, it was published this year. Okay. Both books have been published this year.
I might just have to give that book a go. This is twice now you've pitched me on this, so maybe I'm just have to bite the bullet. I'm just not sure whether my non-scientific sort of way of looking at the world is really going to get this. But I mean,
I'll be really interested in your response.
All right, no, I will put it on the list.
Yep, good. I'm delighted.
Good work.
So, what about you, Sue?
Well, I'm not a great reader of non-fiction, but I did really love the Tara Westover Educated book. I think we were all impressed and blown away by that. I have been reading a few books on Islam this year, and I found that very interesting because I think it's very easy to sit here and criticise or make ignorant statements. So I have set myself a task to find out more in that direction. And I'm you would never describe me as a religious person, so it's a bit of a stretch, which is good. From a fiction point of view, the ones that stand out, I guess, are, well, one of the reasons I love historical fiction is that it makes you do some research, because you can't just take anything at face value. It is fiction after all. It's a good source of information, but you need to dig deeper. And the one that made me dig deeper, I guess, was Tombland.
Quite literally.
Yeah, in the Shard Lake series. The great Elizabethan, by now, detective of a sort and lawyer. But a fabulous book. And I guess the other book that's impressed me in the fiction stakes has been Anne Cleeve's new book.
Oh, yes.
New setting, new character.
Yes.
The Long Call. Yeah. I think it's what it's called. But I can recommend that. I think she just shows what a proficient and skillful writer she is.
And what's going to be very exciting is you can see that this is going to be the start of a whole new series, because she has finished with Shetland.
Yep. Jimmy Perez is no more.
But I understand that Vera will continue.
That's my understanding, yeah.
And what was very interesting recently is they had a pop-up TV channel where it was just a Vera channel.
Good grief.
And I think it's coming back in the new year as it's going to be part of a new channel or one of the, so it's going to be, you can dose yourself up on Vera should you wish to.
For some reason, I'm going to start with the television adaptations. For some reason, I don't know. It just seemed Shetland to me was just so beautiful to look at. That'll do me on those. So it's not. Sometimes you start it the other way. The TV first.
But Vera is excellent.
Yeah,
I think, because it conveys is it Norfolk coast?
No. Well, it's Northumbria. It's that stark, dark,
and it really does convey that. And the actors they've got, just do the part, do the job.
Yep, certainly does.
And so perhaps I was going to ask about what's happening at Elmo's, but that can perhaps come in when you talk about, because what you're going to talk about, Sue, this hour is actually going to be the book.
I've waved the summer reading guide around in previous episodes, but I thought I'd spend a bit of time talking in depth a bit more about what's selling, what I've liked, and some tips for Christmas buying.
Right. And Gareth, I'm just going to hand over to you the copy of John Licari's.
John Licari's Agent. I've got two books actually. There's McEwan's Cockroach, which I can deal with pretty quickly, and John Licari's latest Agent, singular, running in the field. Great title actually.
Good title.
And this was this is a has got Velda and I, who both read it, kind of like taking perhaps a not quite as positive as we have about most books we've read, but we'll get to that shortly.
Right. And I'm going to talk about a new crime writer author that I have come across, Barbara Nadel, Nadel, and she's British. So I'm really excited about finding a new crime writer with a setting in Turkey. And so that's a bit different. So that's what we're going to be discussing today. Gareth, would you like to start off with Cockroach, please?
Right. Ian McEwan's 18th book, a novella. And so what happens when a novella arrives in the bookshop. Now, this is 100 pages long. It's a tiny, slim book. There's a lot of air in it. The printer's there's plenty of space, and there's big sort of chapter section starts, which is kind of, there's not much there. How do you price it?
How do we price a book? Well, we operate under a number of constraints. We obviously source our books from a distributor who acts on behalf of the publisher. So we get a wholesale price, and there is also such a thing as a recommended retail price on every book that comes out. However, depending on the number of books that we buy, some wholesalers will offer discounts, and sometimes we deliberately price a book lower because who are our competitors in book buying? Amazon and the warehouse. So for the books that we think warrant it, we will have an Elmo special price.
Right.
It's not on size of book.
It's not on the number of pages.
No.
Oh, okay.
No, or the number of white pages. No.
You've dispelled that one for me. Anyway, the book opens. That morning, Jim Sams, clever but by no means profound, woke from uneasy dreams to find himself transformed into a gigantic creature. Now, and what we really have here is the novelists of our time taking on the current situation, and this is taking Kafka's idea from a book called Metamorphosis, once again another very slender book, where Gregor Samsa wakes, and he's a man, but he is turned into a giant insect. So this is the reverse. So the cockroach, it's an insect turned into a man, and not just any man. Now, Jim, in his previous life, was ignored and loathed, but in his new incarnation, is now the most powerful man in Britain, Boris Johnson. Probably still loathed, but definitely by no means ignored. And his mission is to carry out the will of the people on that great topic of Brexit. Nothing is going to get in the way of our cockroach turned into a man. The opposition, dissenters, the rules of parliamentary democracy, all will be rolled over. Intelligent book, funny, darkly so. It's in a way, I've seen it called a comic triumph, and I probably agree with that. But it's the world in a strange place. The parallels, though, are not actually kind of like Kafka. They actually harken back to a lecture I can well remember on Jonathan Swift, who wrote pamphlets taking on issues like that. And I can well remember where his one was on the solution to the famine in Ireland was to eat the young babies. And that was his provocative pamphlet, and it was discussed how they would do this and the recipes and all that. Caused an outroar, absolute sensational outroar, but it got people talking about the famine. This is more like a Swiftian take on it. There's a political motive behind all this. Now, comparing politicians to cockroaches is a rather toxic metaphor, of course, but with a long history, right back to Roman days. That's been carrying on, and it makes it a little uncomfortable, especially in New Zealand here, where we tend to, even though we're very sceptical about our politicians, we tend to give them a lot of leeway, and
we're far too nice.
We are very nice, and not like in Britain.
Because the cockroach is the great survivor. So who's the great survivor of New Zealand politics?
We're not going anyway. We soon discovered that all of Sam's colleagues are cockroaches, so the whole cabinet are cockroaches except one, of which they managed, of course, with fake news and just using all the techniques of modern politics, they drive him out. And it really poses a question of, what could be more absurd than Brexit? But you can't laugh this out of existence. McEwen's parable often offers some relief from a potential farce that has gone long beyond a joke now. So, good little book. If you're a McEwan fan, which I am, you'll gulp it down and really enjoy it. Terrific read.
Yeah, I've read it.
Okay.
I liked it. It's impressive and clever.
Yeah. And, but that gets us on to our second book. Straight into it. John Licari's. I don't know how many books he's written, but this is the latest on the bookshelves. Can get it at Elmo's. Agent Running in the Field. Now, the Cold War, back in the days, the good old days, the Iron Curtain. Remember the velvet curtain that we had in London where Licari would draw these curtains back, and we the readers got a chance to see spies in action, and we learned about spycraft and the machinations of spy masters in each country, and the books were truly fabulous. I mean, he launched himself with The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. It was so successful, it was kind of like renamed by the publishers as The Spy Who Came In For the Gold, but it was really got it going. It was a tremendous read. But today, this is a more contemporary take, and the old certainties are by no means we're sure of them. Today we're in the world of the Putin, Trump, Brexit, sort of the hard right political scene is embedded in the world, and we've got our character, which is Nate. Now, he's been in the Secret Service for 47 years, so it puts him probably into his 60s, and he's returning to London after running agents throughout the world. It's hotspots. He's arriving back with his wife Prue, who's a high-end lawyer, working on good causes. But Nat has passed his prime, but he's given one last job running a sideshow at the Haven for sleepy spies, really. But Mother Russia is plotting, and we've got the story of how badminton, because Nat is a great player, is the catalyst why he meets a young man, Ed. And Ed will take all the characters down the spy political rabbit hole and ensnare them all. I can't really I won't tell you any more about the plot because, like in spies, loose lips here. We can't say too much. But we'll know, because it's a Licari book, this is what's going to happen, that the red herrings will get dispatched, the traitor will be discovered, and Nate will have to choose. There's always a decision in these books, and it's often between old loyalties and, in this case, new friends. Val, you've read this.
Yes.
I mean, I've got a pile of positives and negatives. What do you want to start on first?
Well, I only finished it because I knew you were talking about it today. Otherwise, I would not have finished it. I'm glad I finished it. But for the first half or so of the book, I could have stopped at any time. And part of that was the edition that I was reading. So this is slightly aside from the contents of the book. The edition I was reading was a large print one, which happened to be the one I just booked it online, which I think you did as well. And I think we both ended up being the first two consumers of this particular copy of the book from the Carlton Library. And within it, it has words in bold throughout. Almost every page has got one or two words in bold. And it just drove me crazy. I really, really didn't like it. I just found it very distracting. And so that's why I kept on reading it in a way, thinking perhaps I might have been, the distractions of those bold words might have been influencing my reading of the book. I mean, they certainly did. But you had an interesting comment to say, Sue, when we were talking about this.
Elmo's would never stock a book like this. I'm sure the Elmo's copies of this are perfect.
Well, we don't stock large print copies simply because there's not the demand.
No.
The library is a different thing. Just looking at this, it seems really random.
It is random.
I thought it was a way of forcing the reader to think or put emphasis on certain words. But when I actually look at it, that doesn't hold true.
No.
So I can see why it would annoy you, because you think, why is that in bold print?
Is it just an early print that for...
No idea.
No idea.
No,
Okay.
I can't think of an explanation.
And so if you're going to read this latest Licari, do avoid the large print edition because it will actually irritate you from here to kingdom come.
Right. Yeah, no, this is a book that really has no new twists. Now, like, Licari is Mr. Twist, and I want twists. Nothing really is twisty in this. It's got a very insipid ending as they slip out the back door. No one has a memorable line that you can trot out to say, look, listen to this. And it's very average and not a lot of fizz. However, let's just, flip it over a little bit. It is a contemporary take. We're right in today's politics, and that gives it a kind of resonance that we know about. Slow tension. All his books have got this deliciously everything moving to on and getting rather ominous and dark, and the agents are in trouble, and what are we going to do? There's a little bit of that. Everybody and everything is suspect, and it really is. You can't trust the spies, you can't trust the news, you can't trust the politicians, you can't trust the geopolitics. It's so today, and it's how we're living our lives. And Licari has plunged us into this. So, a lot of new books I noticed at Elmo's, you pick them up, and it goes, "This is the new Licari." Now, most of these books I don't think are kind of worthy of that title, because if you go back, this man was an absolute master of this genre. I mean, he is the name of...
Absolutely.
And you think of all the spy writers who have come out of this. I mean, he actually invented the idea, I think. And I mean, there are previous examples, but he set the standard for, a superb era of excellent spy writing. But in the end, it's not just the Cold War or the Iron Curtain that's that have got a bit tired. It's Licari. But hey, let's cut him some slack. This is a man in his 80s and still able to get a book out to fans like myself, who and it's just a reminder of how good he used to be, and just... how we probably... I'm not even sure whether we'll see another book.
I didn't get the sense we would after reading that. But who's to know?
So what drove him to write this then, do you think?
I think he's a writer. I don't think the writers can stop. I think that's what until they they carry them away. I think
just like Clive James then, just keep on trucking.
And it's kind of, what are they going to do? I think they're incredibly obviously wealthy from their writing work, but I think they just have so much fun and enjoyment that
it's their life, isn't it?
Yeah, and he's not the first writer that's suddenly come up with a book at the end which was not quite up to his high standards before, and he won't be the last.
Thank you. I think what we'll do now is have our music break, and to celebrate the season, we have got a little bit of a Christmas carol for you. Welcome back to Book Lovers Corner, Arrow FM 92.7 FM, and we are in the last broadcast for 2019. Look forward to seeing you again in 2020. Now I'm going to talk about a new find for me, and I'm very excited. Barbara Nadell, A Knife to the Heart. So I've been investigating who this Barbara Nadell is. She's a very prolific writer. But first of all, she is British, Nadel. So whatever.
Yeah, call it what you will.
Let's call it the tennis player, Nadell.
Okay. She's British, born in the East End of London, trained as an actress, taught psychology in schools and colleges, worked with sex-abused teens. She's a mental health advocate in psychological or psychiatric hospitals. She's a PR officer for the National Schizophrenic Fellowship. She has great knowledge of mental disturbance. So she comes to her writing with quite a significant background in mental health issues.
You mean dysfunctional crooks and villains?
Well, or ordinary people as
struggling.
we can be, just struggling with life, and people getting themselves into situations over which they have no control, or where they choose to have control and it has unforeseen outcomes. And that's certainly present in the book I'm going to be looking at. She used to live in northern England, and I love the description. She lived in northern England till 2014 with her husband and 6 axolotls.
Oh, it's hard to love them.
And I can remember when I was working at Melbourne Uni up on the 10th floor, we had a lab technician who loved axolotls, and we had 2 axolotls in the corridor. And it was always I always found it a very bizarre experience, really, to be sort of working alongside axolotls all the time.
I could never have a pet that I couldn't spell. It would be.
And of course a cat that she loved. So she has a son who's a published academic, but she also makes regular visits to Turkey to visit family. So I'm presuming one of or more of her offspring are living in Turkey, or grandchildren. I mean, it's not clear, but she obviously has family in Turkey, visits there regularly, and that would explain how this book, A Knife to the Heart, is actually the 21st book in the series featuring Inspector Hickman. And I mean, I can't believe I've not come across her. And you think the same, Sue?
Yeah, not heard of her.
Yeah, it's it'd be interesting to know where her readership is, whether it's a kind of UK readership and but now tracking out or...
Yeah, well, I checked it out with the library online catalogue, and there's only another book of hers in there, which I will get out.
So the publishers haven't felt that, New Zealand's worth a shot up with it. So
and this is what I explored with Sue. Why is it? And she is a good writer. It's, she had me captivated from the beginning, and I was thoroughly engaged the whole way through. So it's not that she's not a good writer. And so that's that whole question about why we don't see some writers.
That's right, we don't. They're just not available, not picked up here.
But I could never read a series from the latest. I would want the book one in case, because some of these writers, everything's predicated on what went before, and they make references to past cases and past characters and all that. Or do you think that's a standalone?
It could be a standalone. I wasn't irritated at all.
because some books.
And I
they
think
do.
I would get irritated if that
Yep.
existed.
Yeah.
Now, this particular book is about two families, one of whom is the family of a military family, who I think are the very have been in the past, the very fortunate, graced with lots of money, very, blessed with all sorts of
the elites.
accolades, the elites of the society in Turkey. And then the other family is the family of the inspector who is has got daughters, and so it's the families of these two men who come into the frame of the story quite significantly. Now, you may recall that in 2016 there was a purge of people in Turkey.
Journalists, media,
teachers. It was thought that they belonged to a religious group who were going to overthrow the government. And you certainly get, this is published this year, you certainly get a sense of the fallout from that on totally innocent people. And so the inspector Hickman, he got out before he was booted out, because he was not wanted by the new sort of elite in the police. The head of the other family, the military family, who is an admiral, he ended up in prison, and he's in one of the notorious prisons.
So this is cutting across all society.
So you get a sense of that purge was across the whole of society. And you get from reading what you read, but it's still, a lot of it's still going on.
Well, Erdogan's, making the state an Islamic political state, has put that country into turmoil, and it's been going on for a long time now.
Yeah.
And, from being one of the great secular states poised to enter the EU, now it's a whole different being,
Well, one of the daughter of ex-Inspector Hickman and his life had been policing. He was that was his
great
whole
context
being
for writing a book. Yeah.
And his daughter, he had modern daughters, and one of them had been a flight attendant. She'd worked for Turkish Airlines, she'd buzzed around the world all over the place. Then she worked for a budget airline, Marmara Airlines. And she was suddenly dismissed because her phone contained an app that was used by the religious group who were accused of undermining the government. Now, she'd never used the app, but she, as a result of having that app on her phone, she lost her job, but she lost her apartment, and she can now no longer find a job. And so she's back to living with her father, the ex-inspector. And so there you have, within one family, at quite different ends of the spectrum in terms of age, who have had significant impact by what's happening with Erdogan's Turkey.
I mean, it is a tragedy, the rolling back of women's rights, which they had been a kind of exemplar country under Ataturk sort of Ataturk's right of the way it was all set up. To take these steps is, I think, people. Well, and some of the things we've seen that happen over there are kind of. We're shaking our head in what was once, a fabulous country, and now seems to be not so sharp.
Yep. So you've got these two families who've been impacted on by what's happening in current Turkey, and you end up having, in addition to this, the military family, who had been very well off, owned a beautiful old villa on the shores of the Bosphorus, and you will have seen them in your sailing out of Istanbul, Gareth.
Yep.
And I've seen them when I've done the sightseeing trip. Fabulous old wooden villas, and the family used to live there, but of course now can't afford to. And they were sort of booted out of their house as well when the father was put into prison. But there's a lot of history in that particular building, and so there's a woman who's an historian who wants to actually find out what the history of this is before it is taken down for redevelopment. Her aunt, who's married to this shyster of a property developer who is allied to the mafia as close as anybody could be, what they're doing is they're enforcing people out of their homes, out of areas, so they can level them and build all these apartments and flash buildings.
So that's the
and
crime.
so on. And so no, the crime happened in the old house.
Oh, okay, so right.
Because she was looking at the history, she finds things in exploring through this old house that actually cause them to really think about what is happening, what happened to this daughter who was died suspected of suicide.
Yeah.
And so this is where Inspector Hickman comes in to find out really what did happen.
But how can he if he's not in the police anymore?
Well, he's still, because of his departure, he's connected. He's still got his mates in the police who he taught absolutely, brilliant detective work and brilliant policing. And so they are actually totally supportive of him. And so through them, he's able to do the work because they are in cahoots together.
Wow.
And they choose to work very quietly underneath the current system.
So he's a private detective.
So he becomes
he's the Jackson Brodie of Turkey.
Right, yes, he becomes a private detective. And so I just found it absolutely fascinating. I won't say any more because that will give, spoilers. But I loved it because, it really, you got the sense of where Turkey is today in Istanbul. I mean, I got my tour guide, my book, Lonely Planet book on Turkey out. I got my map of Turkey out with the full map of Istanbul. Had a ball looking through that. Oh, yes, I could see where they went from A to B to C. And that engaged me. So it connected me to a country and a place, a sense of place. It mentioned a place called Artvin, and I thought, oh, I know that. And Artvin's right up in the north east of Turkey. It's where one of the military family's sons disappeared off, and then I looked it up, and yes, we had stopped for lunch there. It's an area where enormous mountains and deep valleys which are being transformed into hydroelectric power stations. And so I remember it quite vividly. So that was very exciting to sort of connect with that.
So if you didn't have that link to Turkey...
Oh, it wouldn't matter. I don't think it would matter at all.
Even more exotic, I think.
And the other thing is it reminded me of the pronunciation of words and how our language is so different from other languages. And like where you say Erdogan with the G, that actually is not sounded. It's a silent G, and it just means you take the previous vowel, the vowel before the G, and extend it. So it's Erdogan.
Okay.
But it just reminded me, going back through all that sort of thing. I really, really enjoyed it.
Okay, that's...
And I will read another of her books that's in the library. And I'm looking forward. There's one going to be published next year, so I will be hot off the press and making sure the library's going to get it in.
So that's a pretty strong endorsement from you, Velda. So the characters, the detective, he's the constant character through all her books, or not?
Yes. Well, she has several series. So there's the Inspector Hickman series, but she has two other series.
It's the Hancock or something.
Which is Hancock series and the Hickman and Arnold series. The Hancock series has 4 books, with another due in next year as well.
Gosh, she's busy
and
then.
Hickman and Arnold has 7 in the series. And so she's a very prolific writer, but that doesn't mean to say that she writes shoddily.
Would you consider getting some of those back books off by Kindle or something? Are they that good for you that you would say I'd invest $8 or something, whatever it is?
I was excited to find a new crime writer in such a different context, and learning about another country much more, and a country that I spent a month circumnavigating it. So it's one that I keep an interest in, but I don't think that that's necessary to enjoy the stories.
Good.
Very good. Yeah, well, and and Turkey flashes across our news and bulletins enough that we're always having a look.
Yes.
If you want to watch a series of Turkish history, you can watch Dirilis Ertuğrul.
Yes, it's actually even mentioned in here.
Is it really?
Yes. That's how important it is. It's
it is a colossally important television series produced in Turkey. And they've followed it up by Osman. Yeah, about Osman.
Osman, who started off the Ottoman Empire.
That's right.
From the book that I mentioned earlier in the year.
Yeah, so Ertuğrul is his father. Yeah.
It's all coming around.
It's cool.
Well, looking at the time we've got, how about we turn to the reading guide and just what?
Yes, summer reading, please.
All right, summer reading guide. Now, this is put together for the independent booksellers in this country by the Booksellers Association, who also pulled together an annual conference, and also produce the book vouchers that most of the independent booksellers sell. So that's their role, apart from advocacy and trying to get some cohesion in the sector, I guess. So and this is a standard throughout the country, but each one is personalised to the bookseller in question, and that's us in Carterton. So it's broken up into 3 or 4 sections, and the first one is fantastic new fiction, and I can tell you what's selling. So what's selling is the book I reviewed last month, which is Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. Also,
that's not just you. When people come into the shop, Sue, and you go, "Hey, look at this book," do you actually, you must be like, "Hey, this is a great book."
Of course, that's my job.
So that's what. It's kind of like the books you love are the ones we're all going to buy.
Well, I can be quite persuasive.
They're going to miss you, Sue.
I can tell you what's quite persuasive is actually the design aspects of this. Well, not the covers of this actual this handout.
Yeah.
There's just the little our picks, with all the sort of making it look like post-its, and it's very clever. Someone's done a lot of good work here.
Yep, but their picks are not necessarily always our picks. So the books that are selling in the Wairarapa as we speak are the John Licari, Agent Running in the Field, which we've just had a discussion on. 3 of the books that I've talked about in previous sessions, Akin by Emma Donoghue.
Which I loved.
Wolf Island by Lucy Treloar, and The Confession by Jessie Burton. They're all great fiction all written by women, but that's not the issue. They're just really good stories. One that is not attracting the attention it deserves is The Siberian Dilemma by Martin Cruz Smith. If any of you remember Gorky Park from years ago, he's written several stories about Arkady, his
Renko.
Arkady Renko,
Yes.
his chief detective, and that's a great series. He's a great writer. The Testaments, we've sold out of our first lot and had to get a second lot in, so that's selling well. Okay,
and we mentioned that as having won the award.
Yep. So over the page to biography.
Just a second. How to Walk a Dog.
I haven't read it, but we've sold out of what we had.
It's been reviewed
It's Sharon
like a dream.
Murdoch, who's a wonderful cartoonist. Yeah.
I've heard that's getting a lot of airtime on the a lot of buzz about that book.
We are pressed for time.
Okay.
So some recommendations in the non-fiction section. Going by Train, Graham Hutchins, which is, you don't have to be a train nut, and there are such people, to enjoy this book. It's beautifully produced, but it's a huge slice of our history. We Are Here, an Atlas of Aotearoa, which is an innovative approach to putting together an atlas, because it's backed up by a whole lot of stats and useful information and essays. It's a huge book. The Brilliance of Birds for Wildlife is the stunningly produced book. 15 Million Years in Antarctica. I would recommend that one. You might like this one, Velda, which is about Antarctica, obviously, its history and its current setup. But the big seller really is Bill Bryson, The Body, which
I understand
Velda's already waxed lyrical about, and that's sold like hotcakes. Tall Tales and Wee Stories, Billy Connolly, we've sold out. We've got more on order. He's always great to read. Peter Fitzsimons, ex-Australian rugby player, but a prolific writer of history and a good writer. So his book on James Cook is worth a look. Also Max Hastings for people who like military history. His one on the Dam Buster Raid, which is so famous. Quickly, if I can, children's books. Wildlife of Aotearoa is probably the big seller and the big push.
Evan Bishop's new one.
Yes, that follow on the success of just Aotearoa. Philip Pullman's Book of Dust, the second one in the Secret Commonwealth series. There are also new books by David Williams, by The Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Jeff Kinney is the writer, and then the great Australian writer of children's stories, Andy Griffiths. We're up to 117 story treehouse now. Always popular, always around for Christmas.
And also, I think, a follow-on from the Wonky Donkey.
Oh, the Dinky Donkey. I haven't even opened its cover, but the Wonky Donkey has just sold and sold and sold, probably because thanks to Scotland and YouTube more than anything.
A granny reading to her grandson.
Yes. But, another one, Lifestyle and Cooking. The pick there is Edmund's My First Cookbook, Cooking for Children.
Isn't that amazing?
It's a great book and very easy, and everything from shepherd's pie to more exotic things, but I think includes Anzac biscuits and stuff like that.
Wow. And I've still got my one, not the children's edition,
Edmunds.
that I got Edmunds before I got married. And
it's essential.
And I still refer to it.
Yep.
Well, I think this brings us quickly to an end. Now, Gareth, you talked about
Ian McEwan's The Cockroach and John Licari's Agent Running in the Field.
Yes. And I talked about the Barbara Nadell, Knife to the Heart, which I am recommending.
And I talked about several books, but I would recommend you get down to your nearest independent bookstore and check out the reading guide
The
for yourself.
summer reading guide, which is just a feast to just read.
Yep.
Well, thank you, folks, and thank you to the listeners for listening to us this year. We have certainly enjoyed ourselves, and we will start again in January next year with Book Lovers Corner on Arrow 92.7 Arrow FM, and I hope that you all have a great festive time with your families and friends and what looks to be maybe a long hot summer. So greetings to you all from the three of us.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
for you. For you. It doesn't matter. I'll wait.